Hey guys, this is your host Space Marine, and I'm kind of bringing you something different today. I kind of wanted to find a filler for kind of something to do once in a while that would kind of be different from the normal gameplay. Not that that isn't interesting or anything, and I will be bringing more of that. Don't worry. This is just the first video I plan on releasing. I plan on releasing it Monday, so you'll probably see this first, but Wednesday I should be re-releasing El Dorado, the actual first episode, because I released the setup episode, but not the actual episode after that. I don't believe I did. I'll have to double check that, but yeah. So this is I haven't really named the series yet, but it's going to be something along the lines of like it's basically going to be about historical events or things that took place in history that people have kind of forgotten about. And this one in particular takes place right after World War One. People remember World War One, but the problem is that there's a lot of misinformation out there. People tend to forget that after World War One, Germany was forced to actually take blame for World War One, when in fact it was Austria-Hungary who was mostly at fault for World War One. Austria-Hungary kind of decided that Serbia belonged to them, and that entire Balkan area was kind of under their control. So when the people there decided they wanted their own government, Austria kind of, they didn't like that. They decided they were going to invade and conquer Serbia rather than letting them continue to be a separate nation. They originally were a part of Austria in the beginning, and then they separated from their own nation. And then Austria didn't like that because they were getting more and more uppity. And it especially got worse after they killed their Archduke Ferdinand. And it was a mix of a lot of issues. World War One was. I know this is, talking about World War One and stuff. This is kind of like setting the backdrop for why the Treaty of Versailles is so important. But Austria wanted to prove, or Austria-Hungary, I should put it, wanted to prove their power in that region and kind of back up their statements. Well, the problem with that was that not too long ago, Russia had actually lost a war to Japan, and they were very weakened. So they kind of wanted to show off their actual military power. They kind of want to say, hey, we're still a military power. So they actually ended up, mobilizing early and saying if they go to war with Serbia, then we're going to war with, Serbia or with Austria. And so Germany said, Germany from the very beginning kind of warned Austria-Hungary, like, don't do this. This is going to cause trouble. And then Russia basically said that they would declare war on Austria-Hungary if they declared war on Serbia. And so Germany, being the good ally that they were to Austria-Hungary, decided that if Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary, that they would declare war on Russia. Well, the problem was that France and Russia were allies, and so therefore they would have to declare war on France as well, which then also would bring in the UK. America kind of got involved because of rising imperialist thought in America, but we'll save that for another discussion. Most likely, we'll talk about the War of 1898, because that'll be an interesting topic. But so the war happens. War breaks out between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, and so, true to their word, Russia declares war on them, and Germany declares war on them, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason why this peace treaty is such a important document, although it's not really remembered as such, it was not really successful in its resolution of the war. The Treaty of Versailles, French Traité de Versailles, I probably mispronounced that a lot, was one of the peace treaties at the end of World War I. It ended the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers. It was signed on the 28th of June, 1919, exactly 5 years after the assassination of the Archduke. Hold on one sec. My mouse is dying. Oop. Let me click that. Go back. Sorry about that. Exactly 5 years after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The other Central Powers on the German side of World War I were dealt with in separate treaties, which is actually pretty normal for wars. If you actually look in history, it's pretty common for that kind of thing to happen. And in games, that's especially common because people want to try and get as much land as they can. So if you ever play EU4 or Victoria 2, you want to piece out everybody else first, except for, I guess Victoria 2 and CK2, you don't do it as much because you don't get as much extra stuff. But especially in World Wars in those games, CK2, you don't have World Wars. But in Victoria 2, when you first get Great Wars, as they're called, you definitely want to piece out and get as much as you can. But when you have Great Wars in Victoria 2, you actually take all of the stuff at once. You don't have to worry about separate truces. But in EU4, you definitely want to piece out everyone separately. You get lots of extra prestige. But that's kind of because that's how the real world works. And so it kind of translates very well into those kind of games. And then although the armistice signed on the 11th of November 1918 ended the actual fighting, it took 6 months of negotiations at the Paris Peace Conference to conclude the peace treaty. The treaty was registered by the Secretariat of the League of Nations on October 21st, 1919, and was printed in the League of Nations Treaty Series. The League of Nations was sort of the precursor to the UN. It was what the UN kind of, like the idea of the UN came from the League of Nations. The League of Nations kind of fell apart though because no one really wanted to be a part of it. It just, at the time, globalization wasn't as powerful as it is now and as it was when the UN first formed. So there really wasn't any reason for people to join. They kind of felt like they should just stick to their allies. So, but the reason why this document is so important is because it required Germany to take the blame, and her allies, of course, for causing all of the death and destruction and all of the cost of the war. And so basically it forced Germany to sign the treaty that was the article in this treaty, called Article 231, as it says right there, later became known as the War Guilt Clause. It forced Germany to disarm and to make substantial territorial concessions and to pay reparations to certain countries that had formed the Entente powers, which is France, US, UK, and any of the little powers that were a part of it. The Entente were the quote-unquote good guys. I'm going to be unbiased in this, so I'm not going to, they're in war and history, there really is no good or bad. There's just decisions people make. In 1921, the total cost of these reparations was assessed at 132 billion marks, then 31.4 billion or 6.6 billion pounds, roughly the equivalent to the US 442 billion or the UK 284 billion marks in 2015. Basically, that crashed their economy. If you look at after World War I, there was a lot of harsh times in Germany. A lot of people were unemployed, and they had a lot of trouble stimulating the economy because everybody kind of felt like there was no place for them to work because there was no money. You couldn't pay your employees if you didn't even have money yourself. And I was in history class, and we were talking about they actually at one point had to start using wheelbarrows because the mark was worth so little because of inflation. They literally were scraping money off the streets and into garbage. Like, they threw money away. Like, the money was worth more as kindling and as fire than it was worth for the actual mark itself. You might as well just throw it away at that time. And notably, there was a French soldier who heard about the Treaty of Versailles and what it entailed. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but I believe he was to have said something along the lines of, this isn't a peace treaty, it's just a 20-year armistice. And he never, if I remember correctly, he didn't live long enough to see how accurate he was, because 23 years after he said that Germany declared war on Poland and began taking land from them. And then if you look here on the Wikipedia page, at the time, economists, notably John Maynard Keynes, predicted that the treaty was too harsh, a Carthaginian peace, and said that the figure was excessive and counterproductive. The contemporary American historian Sally Marks judged the reparation figure to be lenient, a sum that was designed to look imposing but was in fact not, that had little impact on the German economy, and analyzed the treaty as a whole to be quite restrained and not as harsh as it could have been. The problem with the way she saw the money was she was looking at it from an outside point of view. To the people who lived in Germany, it was a very harsh treaty. A lot of people starved. And it's actually one of our presidents, I believe it was Woodrow Wilson, actually became president because he not only he helped Americans escape France during World War I believe it was. He also gave sent free food to German civilians who were starving during their harsh economic downturn. And this was slightly before the American Great Depression. And so that's actually how he won his presidency, was by showing that he actually was a humanitarian, and it allowed him to get a lot of publicity for it. But the result of these competing and sometimes conflicting goals among the victors was a compromise that left none contented. Germany was neither pacified nor conciliated, nor was it permanently weakened. The problems that arose from the treaty would lead to the Locarno treaties, which improved relations between Germany and the other European powers, and the renegotiation of the reparation system, resulting in the Dawes Plan, the Young Plan, and the indefinite postponement of the reparations at the Lausanne Conference of 1932. Now, the Lausanne Conference was held in Lausanne, Switzerland, which is what it's named after. And it basically just made it so that, let me open it up, Germany didn't have to actually pay their reparations until later on. It was held in 1932, as you can see right there. But basically it said they didn't have to make any payments in 1931. And then as the Great Depression started hitting in 32, and the financial crisis started expanding all over the world, they really kind of came to a informal agreement that basically Germany wouldn't have to pay their debt. They basically said that, everybody's just doing really bad, so you don't have to pay your debt anymore. And what was it? Down there it says it. I didn't see that. In December of 1932, the U.S. Congress rejected the Allied War Debt Reduction Plan, which technically meant that war reparations and debt reverted to debt reduction previously granted Germany by the 1929 Young Plan. However, the system had collapsed, and Germany made no further payments. By 1933, Germany had made World War I reparations of only an eighth of the sum required under the Treaty of Versailles. And around that time is kind of when people were doing the worst in Germany. They couldn't afford to pay their war reparations, because otherwise people would be driven into further and further economic crisis, which actually, surprisingly, is what allowed people to rise to power. One of the biggest things people don't understand is they ask, how could Hitler rise to power? And from an unbiased historical point of view, the reason he rose to power was because what people want when they are starving, when they are jobless, when they are at the worst of their worst, is they want promises that things will change, and they want people to try and make things change. And one of the biggest things that Hitler did right was he really promised his people, look, I know the economy is really bad right now, but I will make everything better, and I'm going to try my best to fix things. And early on, he really tried his best to turn around the German economy, even before he became the Grand, I believe it's called the Grand Chancellor. But the reason that people chose him wasn't because he was, a Jew hater. At the time, he actually wasn't, how do I put this? He wasn't actively exterminating Jews, and he didn't really talk about his opinion on it. So that's how the fascists actually rose to power, was that they promised everyone a better economy, a better Germany for Germans, and that things would turn around. And then shortly after Hitler rose to power in Germany and became the Grand Chancellor, he went forth and started changing things and building up a massive military where he would hire lots of people, which actually started fixing their economy, because all of a sudden, people are getting hired by the government. They're making money. The value of the what was it called? The value of the marks in Germany started going up, which made people gain faith in him, and it allowed him to really expand his power base, which then paved way for World War II. So let's take a quick look at, this is the German Empire right before World War I. This is kind of, if you look at the western side of Germany, that's all of the Rhineland. You see where the Rhine is down over here. This was all kind of known as the Rhineland. There was a huge buildup of a military force here, while there was also one right here. This was what used to be part of Denmark. This was all what they owned at the very beginning. And then afterwards, it got split up between some minor countries over here. Poland got a lot of this little parts. Czechoslovakia got a little bit of that. France gained a big chunk of the Rhineland back. And Estonia, who I did not know who they were, so I had to actually look them up over here. I had never heard of them before. No offense to any Estonians out there. I had never heard of them before. And then Belgium got a little piece over here, and I believe that's Denmark's flag up here. They got some of that. And then let's take a look at the dissolution of Austria. I'm just going to go over this real quick. Basically, Austria got torn to pieces. It's up to history to decide whether or not they deserved it. But the very first thing they did, if I remember correctly, let me check the dates. Okay, yeah. Galicia, a lot of this, which used to be part of the Austrian Empire, got given away to a country known as Galicia, which later on actually went back to Poland. They actually joined forces with, well, I wouldn't call it joined forces, but they became part of Poland. And then a lot of this actually belonged to Austria, and it separated out into a country known as Czechoslovakia, which actually used to own this. And then Austria took them over, and all of this was separated out. They would eventually go back to joining the Axis right before World War II. And then the Republic of Austria was formed over here, and they basically got all of this land you see outlined right here. This went to Italy, Tyrol. It was historically a part of Italy. I can't remember when Austria took it, and then this all separated out into Croatia and Serbia. This went all to Serbia. There's Montenegro and Albania. Bulgaria, which always kind of existed separately. But they really got their independence once, Austria was beaten down. Sorry if that's a harsh word. I don't know how to quite put it. They were defeated. Then Romania got, I believe that they had all of this. And then Transylvania separated, and then they kind of formed the Romanian country as one whole unified. And then you have Hungary, which is right here. And that's about it. But thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next